Stark choice for union workers in Pennsylvania, we're learning, ahead of the president's speech there earlier this week. Show up if you want to get paid or burn one of your days off. And by the way, if you're not there, you're not eligible for overtime. CNN obtaining this memo sent to Shell union workers at the Beaver Creek, Pennsylvania plant ahead of Trump's Tuesday visit. And the memo is written by a contractor for Shell. We're told it reads in part, no yelling, shouting, protesting, or anything viewed as resistance will be tolerated at the event. Those who are not in attendance will not receive overtime pay on Friday. To be clear, Trump and his team did not write this memo. Also, I want to remind you, Trump's speech on Tuesday was billed as an official White House event, not a campaign rally for his re-election bid. But the president did directly mention the Shell plant.
I love the unions and I love the workers. And, you know, when I built buildings in New York, I built them exclusively with union. People don't understand that. I was exclusive. This Shell petrochemical plant in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. I did very well here. We did very well. How many points did we win by? Does anybody know?
Let's get right to CNN's Kristen Holmes in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, near the president's Bedminster Golf Resort. Kristen, what does Shell have to say about this memo?
Hi, Anna. Well, Shell is denying that they wrote this memo, and they particularly are taking issue with that line you read about protesting, saying that any language about worker conduct did not come from the company. But when it came to that language about overtime, this is what the spokesperson told us. He said it was understood that some would choose not to attend the presidential visit and were given the option to take paid time off instead. As with any work week, if someone chooses to take PTO, they are not eligible to receive maximum overtime. So again, essentially saying there that it's only mandatory if you want to get paid. Now, we have reached out to the White House to see if they have any response to this. We have yet to hear back. Anna?
Okay, Kristen, thank you for that. Joining us now to talk more about the memo and the optics, CNN political analyst Michael Shear, also White House correspondent for the New York Times, and Jay Newton-Small, a contributor to Time Magazine. Jay, what's your reaction to this memo?
Well, Anna, it would seem to really mix politics and work environments, right? And that's something that traditionally doesn't really happen in the United States, where you're not forced to actually take part in politics. Each person has their own politics. You don't have to say who you voted for. And so to say that you are required as part of your job, if you want to get paid and if you want to be eligible for overtime benefits, to go to an event or a rally that is a political rally in its nature, that's not actually something that is necessarily pertinent to your job or necessary to your job, would seem very abnormal. It's not what the norm is in the United States for these kinds of things.
And Michael, according to this memo, employees were directed to arrive at 7 a.m. We know the event didn't start until 2. No lunch boxes allowed, breakfast provided, but not lunch. Again, this memo was not distributed by anyone on the Trump staff. But we do know how much the president cares about crowd size, and he often talks about people standing in long lines for his events. Was this all to curry good favor with the president?
Well, I don't think we know for sure, but I mean, I think you can make an assumption that when people are putting together these events for the president, whether they're explicitly political events or whether they're official White House events, there is enormous pressure on anyone putting an event like that together with this president to generate a crowd that, that won't look like the place is half filled. I think what this underscores is what we are going to see for the next, 12, 16 months, 18 months before the next election, which is an increasing likelihood that whether an event is an explicitly political event like a rally organized by the campaign or whether it's an appearance by the president organized by the White House, they're all going to be political. This is a president that doesn't stick to the script. He doesn't stick to the teleprompter. And, as we just saw at that event and at so many other events recently, he veers off of whatever the official topic and subject is to talk about everything in front of him, much of which is political.
In fact, this is something he had to say at the event. Let's listen.
I'm going to speak to some of your union leaders to say, I hope you're going to support Trump, okay? And if they don't, vote them the hell out of office because they're not doing their job. It's true. Vote them out of office.
Jay, there is a real fear of how this president retaliates.
Absolutely, you've seen him retaliate on a lot of levels. You know, whether it's going after Amazon because they own the Washington Post to some degree. I mean, they've never done it. That I should be careful to say they've never done that officially. They've never actually said that it was because of that. But certainly, he talks a lot about how he doesn't like the Washington Post. He doesn't like Amazon. He doesn't. And when he says these things in speeches, his people in the government listen, and then they actually take action on these things. And so you've seen a lot of the companies that he names in speeches. Then later on, there are cases brought against them in the FTC and the Federal Trade Commission or in other areas. And so it is something that you clearly, there's a link between the politics and what he's saying, even if it's a non-official, even if it's a sort of not political event, it's a White House event. It is something that he doesn't, as Michael was saying, he doesn't really have any distinctions here. What Donald Trump says is what Donald Trump says, and it doesn't really matter what the event is. And that's clear on Twitter, and it's also clear in real life.
And today the president is tweeting about the planned protests that are happening now in Portland involving white supremacists and counter-protesters, including those affiliated with Antifa, a group that bills itself as a left-wing anti-fascist organization. Let me remind everybody what the president said about this. Quote, major consideration is being given to naming Antifa an organization of terror. Portland is being watched very closely. Hopefully the mayor will be able to properly do his job. Michael, 2 years ago this very week, President Trump said, there were fine people on both sides of the Charlottesville violence. In this tweet, there is no condemnation of the white supremacists also holding events in Portland. Should anyone read into that?
Well, I mean, I look, it underscores what has amazed everybody about this president since that happened and probably long before that, which is that he just doesn't care sometimes about the criticism. Most presidents, in the wake of the kind of criticism that he got after Charlottesville, would have adjusted their language, would have adjusted their rhetoric to understand that at the very least they want to put forward some sense of understanding, of condemnation of white supremacist groups. But here we are, barely a couple of weeks after, two of the most deadly shootings involving people who are on that side of the spectrum, on the sort of white supremacist, white racist side of the spectrum, committing these horrible acts. And you would think that the president would go out of his way to condemn that, to have here's another opportunity to condemn it, and he doesn't. And so, while I don't know that we can get inside his head and know exactly what he feels in his heart, I think it's pretty clear from his rhetoric, kind of the message that he wants to send, and that's not to condemn the white racists, it's to condemn the liberals, what he views as kind of the left.